Hi everyone, it's Jamie Batts, your instructor for Bio 221, and we're going to go over chapter 26. I'll be honest, this is my third attempt at making this video. For some reason my computer, there's a storm going on, so my computer's not acting nicely to me. But anyways, so the beginning of the chapter is basic anatomy stuff. The first little section goes through the 6 functions of the kidneys, which you should know, and you should be able to explain, going through and looking at some of your exams that I just graded. A lot of you, when the essay says describe or explain, you're just listing. So make sure that you understand these concepts and understand how to explain them or how to describe them to somebody that doesn't know what you're talking about. So then you get into the kidney anatomy and the histology. You see those 4 pictures on 498 and 948 and 949. The best one, in my opinion, is the one on the top of 949. It's kind of the cartoony version of the kidney. This shows you the majority of the nuts and bolts of the kidney. So first, let's go through renal blood flow and how the blood flows through the kidney, because ultimately your kidneys are little factories for filtering your blood, and that means there's a highly extensive capillary network within the kidneys that's designed to provide an exchange point for the blood and this stuff that's called filtrate, which is kind of like the pre-urine. It's going to be the urine. So let's talk about this, and again, because this is my 3rd time doing this video, I already have it drawn out for you on my little handy dandy flowchart of knowledge here. I always mess this up. Mirror imaging is tough. Okay, so we start with the renal artery. My little R got erased there. The renal artery branching off of some of the major arteries in the abdomen, branching off into what we call the segmental artery, and then the interlobar artery. The interlobar artery then branches into the arcuate artery. You can see most of these on that diagram on 949. Again, the renal artery is the big red one. The segmental, there are 2 large segmental arteries you can see branching from the renal. The interlobar arteries are not labeled on there, but they are the ones that are going in between the lobes. The segmental break off into those interlobar. And then the arcuate arteries arch around or arc around the renal medulla. So they're the ones that kind of go right over top of that area. Then you have the cortical arteries, or sometimes they're called the cortical radiant arteries. These are the little guys that are perforating out towards the renal capsule from the arcuate artery. They're almost like little rays of sunshine, or rays of arteries coming up. Those branch off into little afferent arteries, which you cannot see on 949, but you can see on 951. If you turn the page, you'll see the arcuate artery, just a little tiny segment, and then coming up from the medulla, radiating out towards the capsule, you see this kind of artery standing up. That's the cortical radiant, and then that little ball of capillaries is coming off of the afferent arterial. Now the afferent arterial, the blood in the afferent arterial can go 2 different ways. It can branch off and go back into the cortical vein, arcuate vein, interlobar vein, etc., or it can go into the glomerulus, which is within a structure called the nephron, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. The glomerulus is the capillary network here that's responsible for filtering the blood from the kidneys. The blood the stuff that's in the blood, stuff that's in the plasma, that's not filtered out at the glomerulus goes into the efferent arteriole, into the through the peritubular capillaries. It gets reabsorbed back from the nephron, and it comes back into the cortical vein, arcuate vein, interlobar vein, and eventually the renal vein. Sorry, my handwriting's terrible. Renal vein, which again is just going to dump everything right back into the systemic circulation. So all of that is kind of described for you. I don't know which page it's on. Your book doesn't get into it that much. Oh, on page 954 is where the blood flow, and you can see the different arteries and veins right there for you on page 954. Kind of diagrams it out, and it does number them for you as well, which is a little helpful, just like my little flow chart there. But what you see on 951 is that really detailed structure of the nephron. This guy right here. Again, arcuate artery. Let's see if I can not get whacked in the head here. Arcuate artery, cortical radiant artery, afferent arteriole leading to the glomerulus. And then this whole yellow structure is the nephron. So that nephron is made of several different structures itself. But let's talk about the physiology that's taking place here. The anatomy's, again, that's just a memorization thing. This is this, that is that. But it's really important to understand exactly what's going on. So that's what I'm going to hopefully help you understand. Just looking back at my notes to make sure I stay on topic here. So the nephron has like 3 major structures that are associated with it. First, you have the proximal convoluted tubule, or PCT. The proximal convoluted tubule is where the majority of reabsorption occurs. So think of it this way. If you're looking at that diagram that's right there on page 951, maybe I'll sketch this out for you. Don't have socks on today. I got a blanket instead. It's a little chilly. So this erases. Let's talk about what's actually happening here in the glomerulus at this juncture. So you have the blood flow coming in. This is the afferent arteriole. It says AFF. Maybe I'll scoot closer. Afferent arteriole, and it leads to this capillary network called the glomerulus, and then you have an efferent arteriole, EFF, there. Well, this glomerulus is surrounded by a capsule. Right, so this is the glomerulus. I'm just going to put a big old G on top of that. That's the glomerulus. And we'll talk about all the membranes and everything that's involved in that, because it is a specialized structure there that you should understand. But this is basically like a big, I think of it as a big catcher's mitt. And this big catcher's mitt is basically designed to catch the stuff that's coming out of the blood. Think of it like this. The blood's coming in to the nephron through this afferent arteriole, and it's coming at a fairly high pressure, right? It's an arteriole. So the blood is highly pressurized there. It's still getting pumped from the heart. So when that blood hits this capillary, it kind of slams into it almost. And that slamming is going to knock all the junk out of the blood. And that junk is going to be caught by this glomerular capsule. So the glomerular capsule is kind of like a catcher's mitt. Imagine that you're throwing a water balloon at a little mini target, right? And that water balloon hits the target, but it doesn't just stop there, right? The balloon itself may stop here and pop, but the water goes beyond that target. It's the same idea here within the glomerulus. You have a highly pressurized system slamming into a wall. So stuff is going to come out. Now, exactly what type of stuff am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about sugars, perhaps. I'm talking about ions, sodium, potassium. I'm talking about hydrogen ions to help balance your pH. I'm talking about urea, which is a waste product from metabolism. So all of the waste products that have been accumulating in your body, the bicarbonate, right, from the carbon dioxide bicarbonate system, all of those things are going to be expelled at this juncture point. And so what that means is your body is basically saying, I don't need any of this. I don't want any of this. Get this out. But what actually happens next is kind of interesting. So remember I said the PCT, or the proximal convoluted tubule, is the first stop on the tour through the nephron. So here's our glomerular capsule. And again, I like to draw this stuff, and I suggest drawing this along with me, even though my drawings look ridiculous. It helps activate other parts of your brain when you're drawing. So the first step is this proximal convoluted tubule, and you'll see a little wiggle jiggle area on page 951. And again, that's the PCT. The main job of the PCT is reabsorption. The cells, reabsorption. The cells that line the PCT are cuboidal cells, and they have villi on them, just like the cells of your small intestine. Right? Remember, your small intestine cells had that villi to help with reabsorption as well? Well, you have the same thing happening here. So what's basically happening is your body's slamming all of this junk out right at the glomerulus, and then your body's saying, well, wait a minute, I might need some of that. I'm going to take it back. And that's what happens here in the PCT. 90% of the junk, or the stuff, I use very technical terms, 90% of those ions and waste products and molecules that were knocked out here in the glomerulus are reabsorbed in the PCT. And then you might say, well, where the heck does it go? Well, all throughout this area, oh, maybe I'll do this. I'm going to switch colors. Add some dramatic effect for you. So, all throughout this area are, I'm going to use red because it's a high contrast, even though we're talking capillaries here. It probably should not be red, but either way. There's a capillary network that is strung throughout this area that's called the paratubular capillaries. So these paratubular capillaries act as like a net to reabsorb some of that filtrate. So what we have here, just so that we can understand some of the terms, you have inside the tube, inside the nephron, right inside the PCT and the glomerular capsule, we are going to call this stuff filtrate. It's also sometimes called tubular fluid. Tubular fluid or filtrate, same thing. There's another term that you'll see in the book. It's called the peritubular fluid. The peritubular fluid is the fluid outside of the tubes, and it's not yet in the paratubular capillaries. So in other words, the stuff that's in the PCT, the filtrate, or the tubular fluid that's within the PCT, is getting reabsorbed into the peritubular fluid, and then it will go into the peritubular capillaries. Make sense? So eventually all of these peritubular capillaries collect themselves and dump back into the circulation. So they lead right back to kind of where they came from. Let's keep on going here. So that's the PCT. If you follow that loop, and I'm not going to draw it all because my drawings are, like I said, terrible, and that whiteboard is confusing the way I hold it. You can just really see right there in that picture on page 951, the next stop from the PCT is called the nephron loop. It's sometimes called the loop of Henle. That's kind of the old term. It's now called the nephron loop. And then you have the DCT, or distal convoluted tubule. So we're going to go into what happens in each of those structures in a little more detail in the next video. Since we're at 14 minutes, I like to keep them a little short. So thanks, and I'll see you in part 2.